A very warm welcome to Raj IAS Academy. Am I audible to everyone now? Please type yes in the chat box if I am audible. Please type yes in the chat box if I am audible, students. All right. So, in this session, we are going to see the weekly current affairs from the past 1 week, and we are going to see two very important topics with respect to Indian economy. The first is that of the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and the second is that of Global Minimum Corporate Tax. तो इस सेशन में हम देखेंगे कि ये दो इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स कैसे आपके एग्जाम में स्कोर करने में मदद कर सकते हैं. So the very first topic that we are going to take up is that of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. As the name suggests, it is a crop insurance scheme. Now the very first question that you need to ask yourself is that why do we need a crop insurance scheme for Indian farmers? There are several reasons for that. Because the agriculture is exposed to various vagaries of the environment. There are floods, there are droughts. Nearly 12% of India's landmass of 40 million hectares, they are vulnerable to floods. Similarly, more than 50% of the area can be drought prone in India, and we already saw that one third of India's landmass is suffering from desertification and land degradation. Okay. So, we are seeing that the agriculture is very much exposed to environmental uncertainties. So, this is the very first reason. But why? Because the farmers in India, 86% of the farmers in India, they are small and marginal farmers. Okay. They get very little income out of their agriculture, and that is why we also call them substantive farmers. Okay. So, and more than 50% of India's population is dependent on agriculture. So, these are several different reasons that why agriculture need to be insured. Okay. India is having one of the largest agriculture depending population. It is a high risk profession because of the general weather that can affect the agriculture crops. And then agriculture in India is highly susceptible to risk like droughts and floods. Furthermore, the crop yield instability is there. For example, in previous season there might be 50 quintal per hectare production of wheat, but this season because of heat waves it decreased to 43 quintals. So because of heat waves the production of wheat decreased, and that is why the crop production needs to be ensured so that the income of farmer it is protected from the externalities. Okay. Furthermore, price fluctuation of agricultural crops are high, and this necessitates income insurance also. But please students, don't get confused. It is not an income insurance, it is just a crop insurance. Income insurance can be the next step in ensuring the farmer's income. For example, you might have seen that in some seasons the prices of agricultural commodities like potatoes, like tomatoes, they go very high, and while in other seasons they go so low that farmers even don't want to sell them and they just put it in out the fields as a fertilizer or manure. Okay. So, Indian agriculture has been progressively acquiring a small farm character. As per the 10th agricultural census, the 1.08 hectare is the average farm size in India. 1.08 hectare is the average farm size in India, and that is because of the large amount of small and marginal farmers in India. Okay. So, have you understood the need of crop insurance in India? Please type yes in the chat box if you have understood the need. Okay. Now, let's move on. Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. When was it launched? It was launched in 2016. And it was launched by merging two previous schemes. The first is the National Agriculture Insurance Scheme, and the second is modified NAIS, that is National Agriculture Insurance Scheme. These two schemes merged in 2016 to give us Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. And what is the implementing agency? It is the insurance company that is empaneled by the respective states. Okay, several states form part of the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. In fact, if you look at the context of this news, of this news this week, it was because of this only that Andhra Pradesh, it has decided to become part of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Okay, after having opted out in 2019 or 20. So there are some states that are still out of the ambit of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, like Bihar, West Bengal, Jharkhand, etc. Okay, so the implementing agencies which are empaneled by the state government, they are responsible for implementing this scheme. Furthermore, what is the budget allocation? Budget allocation, I beg your pardon, the budget allocation for this year, for this scheme, in the union budget of 2022-23, that is the budget that is presented this year, it is 15,500 crores. Okay, 15,500 crores. Now, how does it contribute to the sustainable agricultural production in India? Let's see. First is that it provides financial assistance to farmers. Financial assistance to those farmers who experience crop losses in a particular time period, in a particular year and in a particular area. Okay, then it helps in making the farmers income more stable. ऐसा नहीं हो कि किसी टाइम पे किसी साल में फार्मर की इनकम बहुत कम आई, किसी में नॉर्मल आई, तो हमें जो कम इनकम है उसे इंश्योर करना है. वी आर ट्राइंग टू इंश्योर द income of the farmer of that year in which there are crop losses. Okay, now the third thing is that encouraging farmers to adopt innovative practices. Now farmers क्या होते हैं कि they are trying to cultivate the crops in traditional manner only. They fear that if they try some innovative method like substituting chemical fertilizer with the biofertilizer, then they may see decrease in crop yield. Now, if there is an insurance for ensuring their crop yields, then they might want to try new and innovative practices in growing crops. And the fourth point that is related to agricultural sustainability is that it ensures their credit worthiness. For example, farmers take loan for various inputs. Before growing crops, they take loans for seeds, they take loans for fertilizers, they take loans for various agricultural machineries. Okay, machineries. Now, they need to return this money. Suppose in that particular year, unfortunately, they experience crop loss. Now, will they be able to return that money? No. And that is why their credit worthiness with that particular bank, it will decrease for no fault of theirs. And hence, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana will help them to ensure their credit worthiness in the future also. Okay. So, these are the main points why Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is helping the sustainable production, agricultural production in our country. Okay. Now, let's move forward. What all losses are covered under this scheme? Let's see what losses are covered under this scheme. The first is the yield losses. Yield losses of standing crops. See students, these points are very much important. These are important because these can come as a prelims statement in your exam and you have to mark that right or wrong. Okay, you can learn about the various losses and the coverage of this scheme and you may be able to eliminate the wrong answer using these only. Okay. Now, yield losses of standing crops notified area basis. Notified area basis means that state government, they have notified area, that this area will come under the ambit of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and they also notify the crops that these particular crops, they come under the coverage of the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana scheme. Okay. Now, comprehensive risk insurance is provided to cover yield losses due to non-preventable risk, यानी कि वो रिस्क जिन्हें रोका नहीं जा सकता, like natural fire, lightning, storm, hailstorm, cyclone, typhoon, hurricane, tornado. Okay, risk due to flood, inundation and landslide, drought, dry spells, pests and diseases will also be covered. Okay. In cases where majority of the insured farmers of a notified area having intent to sow plant and incurred expenditure for the purpose, like they have planned to plant a particular type of crop, but that crop is not planted, that crop is notified but not planted due to adverse weather conditions, will also be able to claim from this Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana scheme to a maximum of 25% of the sum insured. Okay, these statements are important, you might want to remember it. Okay. Okay. Now, in a post-harvest losses, now look at the term. We were looking at pre-harvest losses before that, there are yield losses, okay, and losses due to the farmers not planting that particular crop because of adverse weather condition. Now it also covers post हार्वेस्ट लॉसेस, यानी कि कटाई के बाद जितने भी हार्वेस्ट लॉसेस होते हैं उनको भी ये कवर करता है, अप टू अ मैक्सिमम अप टू अ पीरियड ऑफ 14 days, maximum up to a period of 14 days from harvesting of those crops which are kept in cut and spread condition to dry in the field. The main thing to look here is that this scheme also covers post harvest losses, okay, for certain localized problems. Localized problems mean the problems that are taking place in a small area only, such as risk like hailstorm, landslide and inundation affecting isolated farms in the notified area would be covered. यानी कि those farms that are suffering from some localized problems like hailstorm, कहीं पे ओले पड़ गए किसी एक छोटे फार्म में और इतना localized problem है, it is not widespread, still it is covered under this scheme. Okay, so these are some of the coverage provisions of this scheme. Now, what are the key features of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana? It follows an area approach, that is the government notifies the area where the coverage of the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana scheme will be provided. Okay, it ensures farmers against all non-preventable, we already saw preventable, non-preventable, natural risk and post-harvest also. Now, one important thing to note about this scheme is that it is voluntary. Before 2020, this scheme was voluntary, but it was mandatory for those who had taken loans using Kisan Credit Card. Okay, those who had taken loans, they were mandatorily covered under this scheme. But after 2020, this provision was removed and now there is only voluntary coverage, that is those farmers that want to be a part of this scheme can be covered under this scheme. Okay, it is voluntary in nature now. Also, a centralized digital platform called National Crop Insurance Portal, it has also been enacted, established. It is made available for all stakeholders to speed up delivery, unify fragmented databases. Okay, so there is a digital India element to this scheme also, which will bring transparency as well as efficiency to this scheme. Okay, now ये तो हो गए इसके features, but now we are seeing that the coverage of this scheme is still limited. It is still limited because there are only 140 out of nearly 140 million farmer families in the country. For the last 3 years, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, enrollment has been limited to 20 million only. Okay, 20 million only, यानी कि 14% something अभी इसके members हैं. Now we want to increase it. So हम पहले देखेंगे कि इसकी लिमिटेड कवरेज क्यों है एंड देन वी विल सी हाउ टू इंक्रीज द कवरेज, व्हाट आर द सजेस्टेड स्टेप्स दैट वी कैन टेक टू इंक्रीज द कवरेज ऑफ दिस स्कीम. ओके, अभी तक आपको समझ में आ रहा है सब? आर यू ऑल एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड टिल नाउ? ओके, so now let's talk about the premiums of this scheme. Whenever we take an insurance or anything, we have to pay regular premiums towards that scheme. Okay, now the premium of this scheme can be divided into 3 parts. Okay, 2%, I beg your pardon, 2% is for the kharif crops. Okay, 1.5% is for the rabi crops and 5% premium is for the horticultural crops. Now you can see that Kharif crops are having higher premium because there is higher risk during the Kharif season because monsoon may be overspread or they may fail, because of which there may be droughts or there may be floods. Okay, that is why the higher premium is for Kharif crops. Okay, now there is no upper limit on the government subsidy. Again, it is a very important statement. We are discussing those statements that can come in examination as it is, because you might have seen the paper of UPSC Civil Services Prelims, and in that paper there are several statements in which you have to find the correct statements and incorrect statements. Now, if a statement comes that there is no upper limit on the government subsidy, a student may think that there should be some limit. No, there should be some limit on the government subsidy, otherwise there is unlimited subsidy towards this scheme. But this is a true statement that there is no upper limit on the government subsidy even if the balance premium is 90%. Balance premium means that the farmer has to provide the premium of 1.5%, 2% only, and the rest of the premium is to be provided by the government. It is to be provided by the government. Earlier there was a provision of capping of the premiums. That means that the premiums earlier were capped at a percentage, but now that capping has been done away with. The capping was done to limit government outgo on the premium subsidy. This capping has now been removed. Okay, earlier there was a capping to prevent the fiscal deficit of the government from rising. Okay, if there are more expenditure than what the government is earning, that means there is a fiscal deficit with the government. Okay, now we talked about the premiums. Now let's talk about some of the reasons in brief that why there is a poor coverage of this scheme. The very first reason is that there is non-implementation or suspension of a scheme by some states. Okay, and these states have suspended this scheme because there was a heavy subsidy burden because of this scheme. That's why they suspended it. Okay, तो ये एक रीजन हो गया कि इसकी कवरेज पुअर क्यों है. Now the second reason for this poor coverage is that there is delay in settlement of claims. Now this delay may arise because of the delay in payment of premiums by the government. कि farmer ने अपना premium भर दिया है, but the state government still not have given the premium to the insurance company. एक तो delay का ये कारण हो सकता है. The second reason of the delay may be the delay in crop cutting experiments, that is the assessment of the crop losses. इनको assess करने में भी delay आ रहा हो सकता है. That is why overall payment में delay होता है. अब देखिए आपका एक crop yield गिरी, because of which the farmer is getting less income what he or she could have get. Okay, अब next cropping season शुरू हुआ, the next cropping season started, but the payments of the previous cropping season are still not given to the farmers. Then they would have to take loans. Then this defeats the very purpose of this scheme of providing income security to the farmers. Okay, so this is the second reason why the coverage of this scheme is limited. Other points are very generic in nature, that is limited training and infrastructure capacity. Limited training and capacity building of stakeholders, that those who are assessing crop yields and crop losses, they are not that much capable of assessing it efficiently. There might be errors on their part. Other reasons like announcement of debt waiver scheme and limited publicity and awareness on scheme due to low literacy, that is farmers are not really much aware about this scheme, that such kind of scheme exists. Okay, so we need to increase awareness on this part so as to increase the coverage of the scheme. Okay, now there are some steps that can be taken to improve. The first is to strengthen infrastructure and technology, that is make use of technology, make use of artificial intelligence, make use of drone technology to assess the crop losses in a more efficient and speedy manner. Okay, evaluate insurance companies' performance, that is evaluate or assess their performance, that whether are they performing as per the desires of this scheme or not, and then see the compliance of the expenditure of gross premium per company per season for publicity and awareness, that there is compliance, they have to comply to make spread awareness about this scheme. Are they spreading awareness about this scheme or not? We have to monitor on that step also. Okay. Now other are using the CSR funds. What are CSR funds? Corporate Social Responsibility funds. These are those funds that has to be spent by those corporates that pass a certain level of threshold, that they have to give out 2% of their certain income to corporate social responsibility and use that CSR funds in this scheme. Okay. Linking crop insurance with climate change. Climate change is also happening, because of which the crop yields are decreasing. If you look at the March data of the wheat cultivation, then you may find that the wheat cultivation, it declined drastically because of the heat waves during that season. Okay. Offering insurance as priority insurance and competitive pricing, that is having more than 2 insurance companies, so that there is not a monopoly in terms of providing insurance for Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Okay. Now we will see a question that is related to this scheme. I want you all to attempt this question and answer, please. Please answer in the chat box. The question is, with reference to Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, consider the following statements. Under this scheme, farmers will have to pay a uniform premium of 2% for any crop they cultivate in any season of the year. The second is, this scheme covers post-harvest losses arising out of cyclones and unseasonal rains. Now, tell me, what is the answer of this question? It came in 2016 prelims. Please answer in the chat box. Okay. Kanvi is saying B, Vishal is saying B, Shreyans is saying 2, Rohit is saying B, okay, Ritu is saying D, Anju is saying B. So, most of you are correct. Most of you are correct. We already saw that this statement is not correct, because there are different premiums. What are those premiums? 1.5%, 2% and 5%. Not a uniform premium of 2%. So, this is a wrong statement, and we already saw that post-harvest losses, they are covered under this scheme. So, the answer to this question is B. Okay. Okay. Now, let's see the next news, that is global corporate minimum corporate tax. Okay, global minimum corporate tax. Now, first tell me in the comment box, in the chat box, corporate tax is a direct tax or is it an indirect tax? Is it a direct tax or indirect tax? Please tell me in the chat box. Kanu is saying direct tax. Bittu is saying direct. Shreyans is saying direct. Okay. What about others? What about others? Anju is saying direct. Okay. So, first see that when the government is there, the government has to perform several different functions. It has to provide national security. It has to provide welfare to the citizens of the country. Now, for performing these functions, the government needs money to spend. So, that is why in government accounts, there is one side of expenditure that the government spends on some scheme or defense or national security, and then there is other side of receipt. Okay. Now, the receipt, they can be divided into again 2 parts. The first is the revenue receipt and the second is what? First is revenue receipt and the second is, tell me in the chat box. Capital receipt? No? Keep interacting, students. The first is the revenue receipt and second is the capital receipt. We are not concerned with capital receipt right now. We are concerned with the revenue receipt. Now, again, the revenue receipt, it is divided into 2 parts. The first is what? Tax revenue and the other is नॉन टैक्स रेवेन्यू. अब नॉन टैक्स रेवेन्यू को भी हटा दीजिए. नाउ वी आर कंसर्न विद टैक्स रेवेन्यू. टैक्स रेवेन्यू में क्या डायरेक्ट टैक्स और इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स. इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स का एग्जांपल हुआ जीएसटी, गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स. In direct tax, we have income tax and we have corporate tax. So we are talking about corporate tax, that is that tax which is levied on corporations. Okay, so ये होता है corporate tax. Now the reason we are discussing this global minimum corporate tax, we will discuss what is global minimum corporate tax, but let's see the context. The finance minister, our honorable finance minister, she has commented that G20 must ensure developing nations earn meaningful revenues from global minimum tax deal. To earn meaningful revenues from global minimum tax deal, she has commented this, and that is why we are discussing this news. So again, back to the corporate tax. Now the corporate tax is one of the direct taxes of our country. Okay, now what is the contribution of corporate tax to the receipts of the government? First let's see that, because it may come as a question in prelims examination whether arrange the taxes or receipts of the government in increasing or decreasing order. Now let's guess what according to you has more receipts. Is it the GST or is it the income tax or is it the corporate tax? Let's check your guesses. Comment in the chat box please. Shreyans is saying GST, Vishal is saying GST. Good. What about others? Kanvi is saying income tax. What about others? Rohit is saying GST. Now let's see what are the contribution of different receipts of the government. First let's see that. 35% is contributed by borrowings and other liabilities, that is, it is the loans taken by the government, it is the borrowing taken by the government, and that forms 35% of the receipts of the government. Okay, 35% is that. Now below that there is GST at 16%, GST at 16%, then we have corporation tax at 15%. Okay, similar contribution is by the income tax at 15%. Okay, after that there is union excise duties. After that we have customs 5% and non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue like fees levied by the government. Okay, that is at 5%. And after that non-debt capital receipts, they are at 2%. They are 2%. Okay. So these are the contribution of different components into the receipts of the government. आपको ये चीज समझ में आई? अब ये चीज क्या हो सकती है? They can be asked to arrange this in increasing or decreasing order. Anyway, one should be aware where the rupee comes from. This infographic is taken from the budget document of this year only. Okay, so if you are taking your prelims next year, be mindful to update this information as per that budget only. Okay. Now let's move forward. So borrowing means loan from IMF. Loan from not IMF, borrowing from government securities. Government borrows from the market also, na? Government securities, T-bills, treasury bills, it includes all that. Okay. Now there is news related to corporate tax from this budget also. We also need to see that, because if we are covering corporate tax, then we should be covering it in a comprehensive manner. So Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman ji on Tuesday kept the corporate tax rate unchanged. In this budget, the corporate tax rate was not changed and offered a concessional rate of 15% for 1 more year. So there is a concessional rate of corporate tax that is being offered to those manufacturing units that are being freshly set up, okay, for newly incorporated manufacturing companies. Now what according to you can be the reason behind offering this concessional tax rate? Okay. Meanwhile, Soha is asking, did not got it, sir. What you did not get, Soha? What's the exact question? Other students, please focus on this, that the 15% concessional tax rate is provided to newly established manufacturing companies. Okay. Okay. Now, what is global minimum corporate tax? Let's see what is global minimum corporate tax. So we saw that there is a corporation tax that is levied by the union government on the companies that are present in our country. But what is global minimum corporate tax? Before that, we need to understand two important things. The first is that of tax avoidance. The first concept is that of tax avoidance. Okay. And the second concept is that of tax evasion. Tax evasion. Okay. The former concept, that is tax avoidance, is legal, but it is done by shifting profit to some other country. Tax evasion is illegal and one can be prosecuted for it, and it is done using changing the entries of one's accounts book. Okay, the first important distinction is this: we are not concerned with tax evasion here, we are concerned with tax avoidance. Okay, why we are concerned with tax avoidance is because there are companies that are conducting business in one country and they are shifting their profits to those countries where the corporation tax is minimum. For example, in India, the corporation tax, we saw that there is 15% for newly established manufacturing companies. Otherwise, the median tax rate is about 22-23%. But there are some countries in the world that offer corporation tax at the rate of 5%. Okay, 8%, like Bahamas, like Cayman Islands. Now, these countries are small, and that is why the profit is shifted to those countries. For example, a company is making 100 crores. Okay, now would it prefer to get taxed in a regime where the tax rate is 20%, or would it prefer to be taxed at 5%? Please type in the chat box. What would the company prefer? It would naturally prefer the destination where the tax rate is low, and that is why they devise some ways so as to shift their profit into those countries, so as to show that these profits are generating from those countries and not in the home country. Okay, so this is called profit shifting. Okay, it is a method of tax avoidance. अब इसको रोकने के लिए, to stop tax avoidance, हमने एक चीज बनाई, global minimum corporate tax. The basic foundation of this global minimum corporate tax is that there should be a minimum corporate tax across the world, across the countries. It should be 15%. The corporate tax should not be less than 15% in any country whatsoever. Now, it would defeat the purpose of tax havens and it would help in curbing the tax avoidance. Okay, they are not doing anything illegal. Okay, that is why we are not able to prosecute it, but we are coming together. The different nations that are being challenged by this issue, they are coming together and performing a global minimum corporate tax to stop the tax avoidance. Okay, now there is a question, sir, is it one more reason of less FDI in India? No, the FDI, less FDI in India, it can be related to that after this proposal it actually materializes and this is concrete. The rules have been established and the global minimum corporate tax has been materialized in actuality. Okay? Now the FDI outflow, it is related to other reasons. It is related to the Russia-Ukraine war. It is related to the US Federal Reserve rate hike. For this, you can refer to the previous weekly current affairs session, of which the link I will provide in this video, okay, at a later time. But let's focus on this right now, the global minimum corporate tax. So आपको ये basic चीज समझ में आई कि हम एक global minimum corporate tax चाह क्यों रहे हैं? Why do we want global minimum corporate tax? ये चीज समझ में आई? Around 130 countries they have agreed with this initiative. Okay? So ये चीज हमें समझ आ गई कि global minimum corporate tax है क्या? Governments faced issue of taxing global companies which operate across several jurisdictions. Some of these generate huge profits but pay little tax because their headquarter is located in some low tax jurisdiction or tax havens. Global minimum corporate tax is an additional tax imposed on large multinational companies, forcing them to pay taxes to countries based on where their goods or services are sold, regardless of whether they have a physical presence in that nation or not. यानी कि जहां पे बिजनेस हो रहा है इन कंपनीज का, उस कंपनी का भी, उस कंट्री का भी हक है कि they tax these multinational companies. Okay, and that is why we are hoping for global minimum corporate tax. Now let's see how the global minimum corporate tax works. For example, there is a country A where the tax rate is 20%, and there is a country B where the tax rate is 10%. Okay, now the company, it shows the profit in country B and get taxed at 10%. But if there is a provision for global minimum corporate tax, then this would mean that 10% taxation तो वो इस country B में देंगे, and 5% जो 15 minus 10 बचा, okay, जो 15 minus 10 बचा वो country A में देंगे. So this is how global minimum corporate tax will work. कि अगर 10% ये कंट्री कर रही है, मान लीजिए आफ्टर एस्टैब्लिशिंग ऑफ ग्लोबल मिनिमम कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स, दिस कंट्री बी इज एडमेंट दैट वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू इंक्रीज आवर कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स रेट, वी आर गोइंग टू टैक्स द कंपनी एट 10% ओनली. Then the global minimum corporate tax, the concept says that okay, you tax them at 10%, but the global minimum is 15%. So if you are going to tax them at 10%, then 5% of the taxation will be given to the country A, which is the rightful taxation jurisdiction of that company. तो ये है इसकी working. Suppose a company headquartered in A is reporting income in country B where the rate is 10%. So this is all this concept only. Okay, global minimum tax rate of 15%. Now, how will it impact India? India is likely to benefit. India is likely to benefit because the taxation rate in India is above 15%. Okay, so it will happen to get more taxation from outside. In 2019, India announced a sharp cut in corporate tax for domestic companies to 22% and for new domestic companies at 15%. We already saw this. So the effective rate of taxation is average 23% in Asian countries. In respect of outbound investment, it will prevent base erosion of tax in the country, as the government will be able to claw back any shortfall in tax paid below 15% by an overseas business owned by the Indian resident. So हम ये top up taxation की ही बात कर रहे हैं. जो ये 15 minus 10 हुआ, 5% क्या है? टॉप अप द टैक्स, एक टर्म है जो इंट्रोड्यूस हुई है ग्लोबल मिनिमम कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स से रिलेटेड. ओके, सो दिस इज द वर्किंग ऑफ ग्लोबल मिनिमम कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स. नाउ लेट्स सी व्हाई इज इट नीडेड. द आंसर इज फेयरली सिंपल एंड लॉजिकल, दैट इट इज नीडेड टू ब्रिंग यूनिफॉर्मिटी. It is needed to check on the tax havens, that is those countries that are taxing at ultra low taxation rate, for example 1%, 5%. Okay, these are tax havens. And the third is additional tax revenue to fight pandemic, that the country, they will get some help if their tax base increases, then they will help, it will help in fighting the COVID pandemic and development of the overall nation. Okay, and it will also help in boosting global economy and allowing taxing global digital MNCs. Digital MNCs, they always get away with the paying of corporation tax because they show that we do not have a physical presence in that country. Okay, we are totally digital in nature, we do not have a digital presence. For example, if a company like Facebook, it says that we are totally digital in nature, we do not have headquarter or any office in India, but there are around 200 to 3 million users in India who are using the services of that company, and still that company is not being taxed, then it is wrong, and hence global minimum corporate tax will help in that regard also. Okay, now what are the challenges? Global consensus. Global consensus means there should be a global consensus कि what would be the minimum taxation rate. For example, if some country is taxing the companies at 12%, 10% because they want to attract investment. Now they will say that we are trying to attract investment and you are putting the minimum taxation rate at 15%, because of which we will lose out on that investment. So global consensus is needed. Consensus on taxation rate, again कि 15% होना चाहिए, कितना होना चाहिए, consensus इस चीज से related भी होना चाहिए. Okay, impact on socio-economic development in developing, least developing countries. Okay, MNCs are a source of foreign direct investment. These corporations help to generate demand with efficient utilization of resources. Now what may happen? What may happen is that अगर किसी कंपनी को हर jurisdiction में सेम टैक्स पे करना पड़े, फॉर एग्जाम्पल इफ इट हैज टू पे मिनिमम टैक्स ऑफ 15% whether it is present in India or whether it is present in USA, then they may not might want to come to India to set up their manufacturing units. They will say, what's the point, we are getting taxed at the same rate. Okay, so least developing countries or developing countries, they may lose out on investment. They may lose out on investment, okay, after it has been materialized. Okay, now right to sovereignty. Again, taxation is something that is a sovereign right of any country. Okay, you cannot say that another body is imposing taxes in India. Okay, it would not feel good, it would not sound good. Okay, so sovereignty of taxation would be impacted if we are adopting a global minimum corporation tax rate. And then issue of digital taxation, again issue of those companies that are digital in nature. Okay, now these are some challenges. What are? Let's see the question related to this concept that we have just discussed. Now let's see how many of you are going to answer this question. It is from the prelims of 2016. The term base erosion and profit shifting is sometimes seen in the news in context of. Please answer this question in the chat box. The first option is mining operation, second is curbing of tax evasion, third is exploitation of genetic resources, and fourth is lack of consideration of environmental costs. Answer it in the chat box please. काश ऐसे क्वेश्चन सब 2021 2022 में आते होते, सब टॉप करते फिर. No? Please answer this question in the chat box. What is the answer of this question? The term base erosion and profit shifting is sometimes seen in news in the context of. Kanvu is saying B. What about others? Taking afternoon nap, no? Shreyans is saying B. Bittu is saying B. Anju is saying second. Okay. So the correct answer to this question is B only. The question is very easy and it is very much related to the concept that we have discussed. This question came in 2016 prelims of UPSC Civil Services examination. Okay. There is one more question from 2001. So old. 2001 question prelims. Consider the following taxes: corporation tax, customs duty, wealth tax, excise duty. Which of these are the indirect taxes? It is to check the general knowledge related to taxation. Please answer this question also in the chat box please. Shreyans is saying B. Kanvu is saying B. Rohit is saying B. What about others? Bittu, B. Anju is second. Yes. Which of these are indirect taxes? Second and fourth. Okay. Good, Vishal. Girish is saying B. Good. So corporation tax, it is a direct tax. अब हमें अगर ये पता चल गया कि corporation tax is a direct tax, then we can automatically eliminate this and this. Now we are left with 2 and 4 and 2 and 3. Okay, 2 and 4 is customs duty and excise duty, and 2 and 3 is customs duty and wealth tax. So we are already aware that wealth tax is a type of direct tax. It is levied on the income of a person or the asset of a person. That is why it is a direct tax. And we know that excise duty is a indirect tax. It is an indirect tax. So in that way, we mark the B option as the correct one. Okay. Coincidentally, all the answers today are B. Now let's see the C is the mains question for this. You can write the answer and submit it on our website www.rajIASacademy.com. Now the question is, what do you understand by the global minimum corporate tax? Discuss various challenges associated with it. It is 150 words, 10 marker question, and it would be very easy to answer using the concept that we discussed during this session. Okay. Now we have reached the end. These are some useful reading that you can get from our Telegram channel. You can click on these links and read about the articles relevant to this concepts. Okay. Anyway, we have reached the end of our session. Now our institute, it is conducting HPAS Prelims Test Series that is totally free of cost. Okay. I highly encourage you all to enroll in this series and get the benefit out of this free initiative. Okay. And with this, we have reached the end of our session. I hope you had a great learning experience. I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you so much.